Okay. Boo-boo, we good? Okay. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to join us for this discussion about nature-based carbon in the Congo Basin. My name's Ben Rattenbury, I'm VP Policy at Solvera, and we have a fantastic panel, which my colleague Carmen is about to introduce, to discuss different aspects of the... Is it hard to hear? Okay. We'll try again. Okay. Oh, that's very loud. The speaker's next to my ear. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's event on nature-based carbon in the Congo Basin. My name is Ben Rattenbury. I'm VP Policy at Solvera, and shortly we will have a fantastic panel discussion featuring leading voices from international finance, from project development, and from the region, from the Regional Development Bank, and from the Congo Basin Climate Commission. So we really have an all-star cast of panelists. But before we dive into that discussion, I just want to give a little bit of framing in terms of the work that we are doing in carbon data. So in the Congo Basin, as geographically defined more narrowly, we see there are 99 carbon crediting projects in total, of which just over half of them are in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The next highest number of projects is in the Republic of Congo, where there's 12 projects. So there's a real domination there from DRC, of course, also the largest country in the region. And when we look at the project types, of these 100 almost projects, 44% are nature-based projects, with a roughly even split between avoided deforestation and afforestation and reforestation, nature-based removals. So there is a broad spread there, but compared to other regions, this is a very low number, which shows that there is very high potential for more projects and more high-quality credits to emerge from the region. If we think about Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which facilitates the trading of carbon credits between nations, we see that the Congo Basin only has one bilateral agreement right now, the agreement between Gabon and, I believe that's Korea. So again, there is much more untapped potential in terms of bilateral agreements within the region to capitalize on the potential of the nature-based carbon credits. So this is a video that we put together relating to some of the biomass data that we've gathered, and it shows in northern DRC the change in the levels of biomass across the country over a period of a number of years. Let me see if we can play this video here. So you can see at the top of the year, so 2007, 8, 9, 10, as it goes up, and the brighter the shade of yellow, the more dense the carbon density is. So 350 tons per hectare is the highest there. And you can see that the darker areas are more deforested. So you can see individual plots of land there being cleared but then growing back. And in general, over this period of 2004 to 2023, 2025, we have a growth of carbon stocks overall. So there is carbon sequestration happening, and much of this is a benefit for all of humanity, of course. So very brief introduction from me there on the data that we are looking to contribute to this region. But now I'd like to hand over to my colleague Carmen, who will lead us through the panel discussion and introduce our panelists. Carmen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ben. And hello, very warm welcome to everyone to this panel about one of the planet's most vital ecosystems, the Congo Basin. So it is often referred as the second lung of the planet. It has a really important role in biodiversity, but also in carbon stocks. It's one of the most efficient carbon sinks that we have in the world. And as forest finance takes center in this COP, I wanted to recognize and celebrate the efforts of the Belen Call for the forest of the Congo Basin, and also for the Blue Fund that we have here at the panel for mobilizing finance to protect this important ecosystem. However, to meet the colossal challenge of protecting the basin, we need more. We need more finance, and I think that carbon markets can play actually a key role in bringing that finance to the table. So today, in partnership with UNDP, in partnership with the government of the Republic of Congo, and also with the Congo Basin Climate Commission, we are having this discussion with a really, really important and diverse panel today, which I'm going to introduce in a second. So to my left, I have Guy Jombe, He's like the Congo Basin Blue Fund Coordinator from the Development Bank of the Central African States. We have Dr. Cabon. He's the technical advisor for the Congo Basin Climate Commission. We have Chris Leeds, heads of carbon markets development and the Standard Chartered Bank. And last but not least, we have Jody Bragger, the co-founder of TELUS Conservation. So I would like to start with a question for Chris Leeds, Standard Chartered. Given your position as a global, in global finance, I would like you to please mention what are the 2 to 3 essential elements or policies that Congo Basin nations must implement to attract the large amount of finance that we need to protect this basin.
Thanks, Carmen. Thank you for having me on the panel. I'm sorry I delayed things a little bit. There was a bit of traffic getting across town, but it is a very, very busy COP, and I think that just shows the level of interest, level of success that we're hoping for here at Belém. So just to get straight to the question, the policy side of things is extremely important, and I think that we see this again and again, not just with carbon, but with all sorts of services and products that are coming out of Africa. And it's all around trust. It's around establishing a framework that people can see is transparent, that it's open, and that people can trust. So what I would say is that what's important is to put in place the key infrastructure up front. That is then allowed to develop, and people can use it, understand it, and trust it. So number one, I think it's around the legal certainty. So what is the framework? What is needed to be able to support a carbon market? What is the country going to do around making it clear what the ownership structure is for those carbon credits that are going to get generated? So if a company wants to come in and develop a project, who do they need to speak to? Who are the key people? Because they may not just be in the environment ministry, they may be in the trade ministry, but also the finance ministry. So who are the very key people to speak to? Or maybe there's one person. So typically you have a designated national authority, a DNA. So make clear who that person is and what the authority of that organization is. And then it's also the actual the legal framework around there. What does a company need to do to actually go ahead and then get the authorizations to develop a project, so it's clear that they have legal title to the credits that are actually generated under that. Now, what we're seeing, of course, is more and more countries wanting to have their own registries, which is absolutely correct. You need national registries. But the linkage then to some of the international registries. So many people will be coming in to develop a project using one of the international standards that has been developed over the years. So it could be Vera, Gold Standard. Increasingly we're seeing Art Trees and some of the other high quality carbon standards that are being developed. So if there's a way of linking the registry, the national registry, to their own registries, that might be worth considering, because then you can have a seamless kind of interaction between the international registry and the domestic registry. So some kind of mirroring. We've seen this in Indonesia as it happens. That's what they've done. They've had these mutual recognition agreements between the government and the standard setter. So when somebody comes in, they use an international standard. It generates credits. The credits are sat in the domestic registry, but can be transferred to others via that registry, and people will recognize that. But this is really about establishing a scheme that will support the local market and support the development of the actual NDC within a country. So the final thing that we want to look at is then, what if there is an export effectively? And obviously many buyers are interested in buying credits that can be correspondingly adjusted. Countries are expecting to get paid more for them, and so they should, because there should be a higher cost of of making that corresponding adjustment, then there isn't, because you're effectively supporting somebody else's NDC by doing so. But the way I think of it is it's like an export credit. A corresponding adjustment, the process for giving a letter of approval is akin to having an export license. And so that's what the government needs to be clear on, and how that's going to work. I think what we're starting to see now are governments actually saying, well, we've got a certain volume that we're going to authorize. And then you need to then create a process for how that volume is allocated. So it could be first come, first served, or it could be some price-based mechanism, an auction or something like that. But these are all things that governments can do to ensure that the rules are clear, that they're open, and that they're transparent. And I think that if you do that, companies will know what they need to do, and then you will really attract much more inward investment, and we'll see some really good projects develop that way.
Thank you so much, Chris. So regulatory clarity, clear institutional arrangements as well, and infrastructure interoperability, and of course making emphasis on clarity around authorizations and corresponding adjustments. Before we move on with the panel, I just wanted to welcome Matthias Nav, the director of the Regional Services Center for Africa from UNDP. Welcome. As Chris was mentioning, we had like a lot of traffic today, so it was difficult to access the venue, so apologies about that. So, Jody, as a project developer on the ground, can you please tell us what is the most single critical practical bottleneck that is slowing down carbon project development in the region?
Absolutely, and I'm going to take a bit of a step back here, because I don't think the main barriers to scaling up nature-based and high-quality carbon markets in Congo are actually practical solutions on the ground. It's not about data collection, it's not about local capacity. The issues really are structural, so I think I'm just really going to repeat and emphasize a bit more about what Chris said there. Just to give a bit of context, we're developing a 21,900 hectare reforestation project in the Bombolemeni Reserve, which is around 2.5 hours east of Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have a signed term sheet for full project finance, 100% offtake, and we've got the financing through to do the full project development. So on paper, we look like a model of an example of how you do a reforestation project within the Congo Basin. However, actually to get to this point over the last 3 years has been incredibly challenging, and I'll explain a little bit why. At the moment, and because of many of the issues that Chris mentioned, there is really no early stage financing available for these projects. We found ourselves in a bizarre situation as a company, and I'm going to be very candid here, and I think this is the way that we make progress on panels, where we had a signed term sheet for tens of millions of dollars, but we couldn't raise the 650,000 needed to finish the PDD, the FPIC process, and establish all of the legal protocol around the project. This is not a one-off problem. It is a market-wide failure within the Congo Basin, and there are virtually no mechanisms for finance at the early stage development costs in this region. Project developers like ourselves are expected to carry all the upfront technical and financial risks until a project is bankable, and that is simply not sustainable, particularly when we're trying to emphasize growth of project developers within the region like we have here in Brazil. It's easier for obviously companies from the global north like myself to carry on through other projects, but local regional projects will fail early on. And that comes from a lack of investor confidence. Obviously, Chris has spoken very clearly about the policy issues there, but there is limited investor experience within the Congo Basin, within carbon market centers such as London, and a lot of perceived risk. Some of it is justified, of course, but much of it is exaggerated. So I think the result is that even with credible projects and government backing and clear land tenure, we often struggle to attract that early stage capital because people paint the entire region with one brush. This is the real issue affecting scalability for the Congo. But what I would say is that we're not here just to complain. I do have some solutions, so I'll go through those now. The ways around this and what can be done: engage local investors. This is how we actually solved our early stage project finance. Local investors understand the risk of the Congo Basin, and they're willing to put money into projects within the area. So whilst we focused all of our efforts to begin with on the typical carbon market finances in London, in Paris, etc., we actually had a goldmine of local investors who are really willing and able and ready to put in the early stage financing, the 650, the 800,000 you need to get a project up to implementation. So we found that was the way of actually pushing through. Local investors understand the risk, they know how to mitigate it, and they understand the opportunities also within the countries and jurisdictions where they work. The second one I'd say for project developers listening in is regionalize those landscapes. We're talking about a huge part of the world. The DRC itself is the size of Western Europe, and the issues that affect the east of the country are very different from what happened in the west. I always say to our investors, our project is as far away as Vienna is from Kiev. And you wouldn't not invest in Vienna because of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, for example. And being able to regionalize areas and understand that some areas have real opportunities while others have barriers was a way of also building up that confidence. And the second one is really, really plan for insurance. I know it's a boring topic when you're a project developer to start thinking about insurance, and project developers are always a little bit more field types. We work obviously out in the field, in the forest. We're often conservationists. Insurance can seem like a kind of abstract thing at that in the early stages, but plan for it. Make sure that you develop the project, you establish the SPV and project structure so it will work with mechanisms such as MEGA. That is how you actually get the large-scale finance in, I think, if you have a MEGA guarantee, which is what we did very early on. And secondly, look at the private sector opportunities available to actually ensure project finance. It really does work. It's how you get it over the line. So, work with the insurance industry, and people like Howdens are doing amazing things. You've got Kita coming in, and of course, people like MEGA are amazing and very, very forward-leaning and really want to get this over the line. So, my summary so far.
Thank you so much, Jody. Thank you for sharing some information on your project, and also thank you for bringing a positive note and a solution-oriented answer to the question, which I think is important. I would like to shift now from the private sector to the rest of the organizations that we have here in the panel. So, Guy, how will the Development Bank of Central African States specifically structure its role to integrate this private carbon market finance into the revenue of the Blue Funds?
Thank you very much. My English is not very wonderful. I will try to express myself in French. Dans la zone de l'Afrique centrale, nous sommes convaincus
Go ahead.
Je regrettais de ne pas pouvoir ajuster d'une langue à une autre comme vous, Madame Nguyen. Et je faisais remarquer aux participants que dans notre sous-région, les capacités liées au marché carbone relèvent d'une partie du capital que nous savons détenir par les pays. Et en notre qualité...
Tu as besoin de faire des pauses. Ce que je veux dire, c'est que what I want to say is that in our region, one of the things that is evident is that the carbon market and carbon finance is something that is held within the countries and that we know how to manage.
Alors, conscient de ce fort potentiel que nos pays disposent, la BDEAC a inclus dans sa stratégie 2023-2027, dénommée AZOB, de mettre l'activité, le développement du marché carbone en Afrique centrale comme l'un des axes prioritaires majeurs.
Conscious of the potential of the region for the carbon market, the African Development Bank of Central States have decided to include in its strategy to 2030, called AZOB, c'est ça? A key element of development of that strategy.
Puisque nous ne sommes pas les pays et que nous sommes un instrument de financement des pays, nous avons cherché à nous entourer des compétences qui sont tout autour de nous et qui sont disponibles.
As we are not a country, but a financing body for the countries, we have made sure that we surround ourselves with the right type of capacities and skills in order to be able to respond to the demand.
Du coup, je vous ai dit tantôt que le plan stratégique, c'était 2023-2027. Et une fois que ce plan stratégique a été adopté, nous nous sommes rapprochés de la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur les changements climatiques, avec qui nous avons signé un MOU en marge de la COP 29, non, en marge de la COP 28 à Dubaï.
So once we included it in our strategy 2023 to 2027, we reached out to the UNFCCC in order to sign an MOU that was signed in Dubai for COP28.
Nous avons étendu nous avons étendu cet entourage avec d'autres acteurs qui sont outillés, qui développent des expertises, surtout en français. Vous me voyez m'exprimer en français. Et nous avons également démarché l'Organisation internationale de la francophonie et son organe subsidiaire, l'Institut de la francophonie pour le développement durable.
So one of the things that we've been very cautious about is to surround ourselves with extra expertise and specific expertise in French. And one of those experts is the IOF, Agence Universitaire de la Francophonie, in order to bring together one of the specific skills, which is the Agence Universitaire de la Francophonie for Sustainable Development.
Merci beaucoup. À la suite, nous sommes allés voir ce qui se passe dans d'autres sous-régions et on s'est rendu compte qu'au niveau des pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, l'activité du marché carbone était beaucoup plus développée qu'elle ne l'est en Afrique centrale et nous nous sommes rapprochés de notre consoeur, la Banque ouest-africaine de développement, mais aussi de l'Alliance pour les marchés carbone en Afrique de l'Ouest.
So we've also scoped the continent to see how it was working in other regions, and we realized that the West Africa region was a lot more active in terms of carbon markets. So we actually joined forces with our sister organization, the Development Bank of West African States, in order to learn from their process. And also, quelle était la dernière organisation, pardon?
L'Alliance pour les marchés carbone en Afrique de l'Ouest.
And we also joined forces with the Alliance for Carbon Markets in West Africa.
Et avec tous ces partenaires, nous avons organisé en 2024 à Yaoundé les premières assises sur le marché carbone et la finance climat en Afrique centrale.
And uniting all those partners, we organized in Yaoundé the first roundtable on carbon market in Central Africa.
Ça a été une activité courue parce que tous les points focaux, article 6, de l'Afrique centrale, mais aussi de certains pays de l'Afrique de l'Est et d'autres pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest se sont retrouvés à Yaoundé dans le cadre de cette activité suffisamment importante.
It was a really important stage in that process for Central Africa because it brought together all the Article 6 focal points of Central Africa, of course, but also some representatives from East and West Africa in order for us to discuss and move the process forward.
À la fin de notre réunion, nous avons convenu que comme les pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest qui disposent d'une alliance sur les marchés carbone en Afrique de l'Ouest, et comme les pays de l'Afrique de l'Est qui étaient en cours de mise en place d'une alliance pour les marchés carbone en Afrique de l'Est, les participants ont décidé de la mise en place d'une alliance pour les marchés carbone en Afrique centrale.
One of the things that transpired from that meeting is that West Africa already had an alliance, East Africa was putting together, and one of the key outcomes of that meeting was to set up an alliance for carbon for Central Africa.
Et ça a été une initiative largement saluée par les participants et immédiatement, le Cameroun s'est proposé d'héberger cette alliance pour les marchés carbone en Afrique centrale.
It was something that was really welcomed by the participants, and the host country, Cameroon, actually offered to host that alliance.
Actuellement, nous travaillons avec nos collègues de l'Alliance sur les marchés carbone en Afrique de l'Ouest pour structurer l'Alliance de l'Afrique centrale. Les premiers responsables vont être domiciliés à la BDAC et vont travailler avec l'ensemble des pays de la zone pour rendre la chose opérationnelle.
So the role of the BDAC in that case is actually to work with the countries to make it a reality.
Nous avons une feuille de route qui est en train de se mettre en œuvre et je suis très heureux de me retrouver dans ce panel avec le PNUD. Je me suis très heureux de me retrouver dans ce panel avec votre organisation Silvera et des développeurs de projets parce que chacune de ces entités dispose de quelque chose dont nous avons besoin comme banque pour être aux côtés de nos pays comme leur instrument financier.
So we've developed a roadmap that is in the process of being implemented, and is very honored to be part of this panel that brings together UNDP, Silvera, of course, and also project developers such as yourself here today.
Nous estimons que notre connaissance de terrain de 50 ans, parce que nous travaillons depuis 50 ans, donc nous espérons que notre connaissance de terrain de 50 ans, notre fiducie, peuvent rassurer les partenaires qui veulent investir sur les marchés carbone en Afrique centrale pour rendre cela possible. Merci.
We've been working and operational as a bank for the last 50 years, and we're looking forward in being able to be the one that are putting this together for the region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Guy, and of course, thank you so much for an incredible translation. That was fantastic. So thank you so much. It's great to hear that carbon markets are part of the bank's strategy, and also thank you for sharing the plans to establish alliance for Central Africa, because I think that the alliances, both from the West and the East, have done an amazing job, right, on capacity building for countries and on bringing people together to share lessons learned. So it's fantastic to hear that. Matthias, I wanted to turn it to you now. So Chris mentioned that regulatory clarity, institutional capacity was something detrimental actually to create proper environment for driving finance. And I wanted to hear about what the UNDP is doing to support countries, if you can share a little bit more about that.
No, thank you very much. And first and foremost, my sincere apologies for coming late. There was a mass exodus of people out at the gates. It took me 45 minutes to get in. But that said, first and foremost, I would like to acknowledge the Congo Basin Commission and also our dear partner, Silvera. We come a long way, but I think we can still do a lot together. And so it's a delight to be here on behalf of UNDP and to be with my distinguished panelists here. For UNDP, we consider this a do-or-die situation for us because we are present in many African countries. We are very close on the ground with our member states. And so any opportunity to really support countries, build their capacities to be able to get into this space of carbon market is what we pride ourselves in. Currently, we are in the process of supporting countries to finalize their NDC 3.0. Now, in most of these countries where NDC 3.0s are developed, we are encouraging countries to be as inclusive and broad as much as possible. And so the next stage, as we have been instructed by the Secretary General at the opening of COP, is for UNDP to help countries actually operationalize their NDCs 3.0. What are we doing to be able to effectively support countries in doing so? First, we are looking at all the various sources of financing. And so we will be looking at private sector. We'll be looking at carbon markets, which is an area that we've been working with Silvera. And so coming back to your question, the issue is this. We pride ourselves in making sure that capacities are built within national jurisdictions so that they can be able to have the right sets of tools and skills to be able to tap into this space of carbon markets. But we also recognize that most of our countries that we work in, the first issue starts with regulations. So how can we support countries have the right regulations to be able to then free up the space for all actors to take advantage of this opportunity? So we're spending more time in building capacities and also helping countries have the right regulation, the right policies to be able to free up that space. Secondly, the issue of governance, institutional governance of all these other supporting entities that would actually free up the space to build trust with private sector, build trust with all the other international bodies, especially related to Article 6, for instance. So what I would like to say basically is we as UNDP are dedicated and we want to recommit ourselves to a partnership that we have with Silvera and with all the other stakeholders to ensure that at least the needed skill sets are given to all our countries that we're working in. I want to also acknowledge the fact that some of the challenges we face also relates to partnerships. And of course, if you go back to NDC 3.0, if we have to support countries to develop bankable projects or pipelines, we need to be able to involve all partners. And this is why I think not only our private sector, but also development partners across the board should all have the opportunity to support African countries to take advantage of this space. Of course, the Congo Basin is where we have the sink, and we want to believe that all the country offices that are in the Congo Basin Commission, for example, will have enough capacity to develop the registries that we are hoping Silvera will help us build capacities to develop their carbon registries, but at the same time have the capacity to be able to access the funds that they have to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthias. For those that don't know, we launched a partnership with UNDP under which we are giving free access to our data on our platform to government officials and also to UNDP country offices. So it has been fascinating to work with countries and to help where we can from the private sector. Dr. Tabuna, I have a last question for you. So what concrete mechanisms are being developed by the Congo Basin Climate Commission that is hosting us here today to ensure equitable revenue sharing from carbon credits and long-term land tenure security for the communities, indigenous communities and local communities in the region?
Je vais parler en français. Ma collègue va transmettre. Premièrement, je voudrais, au nom de ma collègue et au nom de Madame la ministre que nous représentons, vous remercier d'avoir choisi ce pavillon pour ce side event.
On behalf of my colleague and the minister that I'm representing today, I would like to thank you for the honor of hosting this very important panel here under our pavilion.
Donc, merci beaucoup. Alors, le choix de ce pavillon est un choix stratégique.
The choice of this pavilion is a strategic choice.
Parce que la Commission climat du bassin du Congo, le Fonds bleu pour le bassin du Congo, ces deux institutions ont été mises en place par le chef d'État en 2016 en marge de la COP30 à Marrakech.
Because the Climate Commission of the Congo Basin and the Fidjuri Fund of the Blue Fund of the Congo Basin have been put together in March of COP22 in Marrakech.
Donc la mission, c'est pour développer, si on peut dire ça comme ça, tous les projets, toutes les initiatives destinées à concilier protection de l'environnement et développement économique.
So the purpose of the Commission is to actually develop all the projects that are actually bringing together the idea of preservation and sustainable development.
Donc parmi ces activités-là, il y a l'économie du carbone.
Among those activities, there's carbon economy.
Alors donc dans cette sous-région, dans le bassin du Congo, nous avons dans le cadre du système de l'économie verte en Afrique centrale, pensé dès 2010 avec la Banque de développement des États de l'Afrique centrale au développement d'un programme sur l'économie du carbone en Afrique centrale 2010.
Since 2010, we've been thinking about developing, linked to green economy, a carbon market strategy in partnership with our main partner.
Voilà, donc 2015, les chefs d'État ont adopté ce programme de développement sur l'économie du carbone. 2015.
In 2015, the heads of states have adopted this plan.
Alors, donc en 2023, donc avec le PNUD, avec la BDAC, nous avons commencé à travailler sur la stratégie de développement de la finance du carbone.
In 2023, in partnership with UNDP and the BDESA, we started to work on putting together a strategy for the carbon market.
Voilà pourquoi je remercie le PNUD, notamment avec la présence de Mathias, pour donc ce travail que nous avons commencé et qui va donc se poursuivre.
That's why I thank Matthias, who's representing the PNUD here, for the investment and the partnership in developing such a project.
Donc pour la Commission climat du bassin du Congo, ce side event s'inscrit donc dans le concept de la poursuite de ce travail.
So for the CCBC, this project is actually moving towards the continuity of that work that is ongoing.
Donc voilà pourquoi dans les axes stratégiques adoptés déjà par les ministres, nous avons pensé que on avait adopté 4 piliers.
So with the leadership of the president had adopted 4 pillars, main pillars.
Donc un pilier sur la recherche, la connaissance du capital naturel de l'Afrique centrale et surtout sur le stock de carbone stocké et capable d'être séquestré.
So the first thing we did was to institute a scientific forum so that we had all the data and information about the capacity of sequestration and numbers in order to understand what was the capacity and the potential of the Congo Basin.
Deuxième pilier qu'on a choisi, c'est l'identification de toutes les parties prenantes, privées, publiques, sociétés civiles, qui travaillent déjà dans le secteur du marché du carbone.
The second pillar was to do a mapping of the stakeholders from the public sector, parastatal sector, civil society, private sector.
Alors, troisième pilier, quel cadre politique, quel cadre diplomatique, quel cadre fiscalo-juridique pour réguler le marché?
So the third pillar was to look at the framework. What are we working within? What is the legal framework at the level and regional level? What is the political framework? And what is the type of cooperation that can happen in order to do so?
Voilà, dernier pilier, c'est quel est le cadre institutionnel organisationnel, la communication et le partenariat pour développer ce marché.
So the last pillar is to look at the organizational structure and what are the partnerships that can be built in order to move it forward.
Voyez-vous, donc nous avons déjà réfléchi. Et comme nous avons déjà réfléchi, nous avons besoin maintenant de passer à l'action. Voilà pourquoi nous avons besoin des programmes, des projets pour aller vers la mise en œuvre.
So we've done a lot of thinking and now we finished thinking. That's why we need to actually move forward into action and the implementation of concrete programs on the ground.
Alors cela tombe bien, il y a la banque, le secteur privé, les développeurs, la politique, la finance, les partenaires. Donc tout est là maintenant.
Said that we see that all the ingredients are ready and that the environment is ripe because we have the politicians, the diplomacy, the parastatal, the bank, the project builders, so we can move forward.
Alors, donc parmi ces projets, bien sûr, il y aura un projet pour les populations locales, les peuples autochtones qui sont autour des forêts naturelles, qui ont des plantations. Donc, pour qu'ils soient des bénéficiaires comme les États, disons comme toutes les parties prenantes. Donc, pour répondre à votre question, ce que nous sommes en train de faire, ça répond à ce que les chefs d'État ont pensé. Quelle activité pour concilier lutte contre les changements climatiques, développement économique, création d'emplois et surtout amélioration des conditions de vie des populations.
So, because the head of state have decided that it is crucial that we do that, there's a very strong element linking that idea of innovating finance and right of IPLCs. It's very important that whatever we develop is an instrument of development, and that the IPLCs are seeing a fair share, they are the custodians, so the primary users of the forest, that they have a fair share of whatever is being developed.
Okay, thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tabuna, and thank you for highlighting in your intervention the importance of collaboration, right, across like all stakeholders. Like it's impossible to actually unlock carbon markets without that, and definitely indigenous people and local communities, although are not represented in the panel. So I wanted to thank all the panelists for great interventions. We are running a little bit behind schedule, and I know that some of them need to go to other panels. But before we close, I would like to ask the audience if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. No, it's not a question. My name is Abdurrahman Diallo. I'm the UN resident coordinator in Congo Brazzaville. So I'm just part of the partner, the stakeholder. We are well represented by UNDP, the right entity in the UN family, who is leading this agenda. But of course, other colleagues, other entities also, we tackle the issues of research. Other agencies can come and find their place to support this roadmap. So just to reiterate our commitment and our availability really to accompany this journey. Thank you.
So I ask my question in English first, and then in French. I think that one of the things we have not said on this panel is the why it took so much time in Central Africa. Why it took so much time in Central Africa. Of course, there is the legal framework and the scale and the sovereignty of the states and the need for diplomacy. But there's also the predatory nature of the first people that came towards the countries in terms of developing carbon projects. You've said it before. One of the biggest investment is the pre-feasibility investment that most of the countries or the local communities are not ready to have. Donc une des choses dont on ne parle pas suffisamment et qui a vraiment ralenti le développement du marché carbone en Afrique centrale a été le côté prédateur de beaucoup d'acteurs sur le terrain. Beaucoup de forêts, beaucoup d'acteurs, on a commencé à approcher les communautés locales, à commencer à approcher les gouvernements locaux, les exploitants forestiers, en proposant des partenariats qui n'étaient pas vraiment gagnant-gagnant, en mettant en avant le coût de développement d'un programme carbone. So my question is the following. How is that kind of new configuration with a partnership with UNDP, Silvera, the bank, the politicians, is going to change the nature and make sure that we go for integrity carbon instead of predatory carbon? Donc comment est-ce que cet ensemble de forces qui viennent ensemble vont garantir que l'on ne soit plus sur un marché du carbone prédateur, mais sur un marché du carbone développant?
I could start by answering that one because, yes, on this panel we have politicians, we have a very high integrity investor. I like to believe we're a high integrity project developer, and we have the government as well. But what we don't have on this panel is an off-taker. And they're the four things you need for a project developer, a government, an investor, but you need someone to ultimately buy the credits. And I think what's lacking within the Congo Basin are high quality off-takers. What we're seeing elsewhere through the integrity that I think the big tech buyers are now putting into projects where you have community and biodiversity co-benefits intertwined into a project, making sure that there's a secure benefit sharing scheme for local communities, that actually the focus of our restoration efforts are in areas that create connectivity corridors for conservation units or add to protected areas, all the things that make a carbon project add value to a community and add value to a jurisdiction. is kind of lacking within the Congo Basin itself. So what I'd like to see is actually a coalition come together where we can create something like the Symbiosis Coalition, but for the Congo Basin, where we give the confidence for predominantly the big US tech buyers, let's be honest, that are putting the integrity into the market through what they're doing, where we give them the confidence to take that first step into the basin. And that is currently lacking. And I think that is how we actually begin to bring more and more integrity into it, by ensuring that we're selling to high integrity buyers, because that is how you bring the integrity through the project design.
So just to add to that, I think when we had the first time round, if you like, there was no scrutiny. So people could just turn up, anybody could turn up, say they're going to protect a piece of forest, use a methodology which at the time they were less sophisticated, and generate credits and sell them to people. There was no scrutiny, there was no oversight, there was no regulation or legislation around it. So many of the people who did that were very well-meaning and weren't there as predators, but there were some, and I'm not going to deny that. But that's what happens when you have no oversight over these things. So now I think what we've got, and as Jody just highlighted, you have a lot more eyes on what's going on, number one. A lot more scrutiny of what's going on. The process itself is a lot more, they have improved, and they have, they're better in terms of the way that they actually go around the monitoring and the reporting, the setting baselines, so they're more credible. But the amount of scrutiny you're going to have coming into these projects is going to ensure that there is high integrity from that perspective. What we're talking about now is we're talking about credits that will be generated. So companies coming in, whether it's a developer, whether it's a bank, whether it's an off-taker, the government, looking at how this project is going to develop and see how those credits are going to be generated. Credits won't be generated if they don't meet the process. So you're only going to get high-quality credits that come out in the first place. And then finally, as we've just heard, the really important thing is bringing the development of the involvement of the local people, the stakeholders themselves, who are going to be the guardians of these projects going forward. They're the ones who are going to who ensure that there is permanence, because they're going to have to ensure that the local area is preserved and conserved and looked after. That's why they need to get better benefits. What we're starting to see is much higher numbers going to through benefit sharing agreements. One of the projects that we're involved in Brazil has a 72% share to the local people. I've heard that the Leaf Foundation signed a deal this week, I think, with Côte d'Ivoire, and it's 75%. So 75% of the revenue is now going to be guaranteed to go to local people. The next step is to have a process, have a system that monitors that, ensures that actually that money, when we say it's 75%, 75% does actually get allocated, and that's transparent. I think when we start to do that, that's what integrity means, and I think that's when we'll start to really see these projects develop in a way that we want them to, and that's why I'm hopeful.
Trip. It's okay, it's okay.
It's not in the outside.
Merci beaucoup, Suzanne. Excellent question. Excellent question. L'un de mes métiers,
One of my jobs,
marketing et développement des entreprises.
marketing and development of industries.
J'ai fait mes travaux de thèse sur le marketing et le développement des marchés.
I've wrote my thesis on marketing and market development.
Le marché du carbone n'est pas différent des autres marchés.
Carbon market is not different from other markets.
Donc tout marché se construit.
every market needs to be built and
Et
developed.
dans la construction des marchés, il y a des règles.
And in the development of each market, there are rules.
Ce qui n'est pas le marché actuel du carbone en Afrique centrale.
Which is not the case of the carbon market in Central Africa.
Voilà pourquoi, avec le PNUD,
This is
pour
why with
élaborer la
UNDP,
stratégie, nous avons commencé d'abord à chercher à identifier, entre autres, qu'est-ce qui bloque le développement du marché du carbone en Afrique centrale, bien que les politiques ont déjà donné la direction qu'il s'agit de l'application de l'article 6 de l'accord de Paris et qu'on veut un marché souverain.
So with UNDP, we've been able to identify and do a mapping of what are the barriers to development of such legislation in the market carbon in Central Africa.
Alors, vous avez vu que parmi les piliers que nous avons identifiés, il y a le cadre juridique, réglementaire.
And among the
Qui est
pillars,
faible.
there is the rules and judiciary framework.
Donc, du coup, c'est ouvert. Chaque personne peut rentrer puisque le marché n'a pas de cadre juridique.
So for the moment, it's the Wild Wild West.
Voilà pourquoi, comme elle a dit, nous sommes maintenant ensemble ici. Nous devons accélérer pour mettre en place cette stratégie.
So that's why we have to come together and move forward very fast.
Et voilà pourquoi moi je pense qu'au sortir de cet atelier, il y a Silvera, il y a le PNUD, il y a la banque, il y a CCBC, nous avons déjà là un consortium pour le développement du marché du carbone en Afrique centrale.
That we already have by all the stakeholders on this panel, a consortium.
Donc le premier travail qu'on peut demander aux développeurs, c'est de nous écrire, de nous faire ce projet du consortium pour qu'on voit dans la même direction et qu'on fasse la publicité pour que tout le monde comprenne comment nous fonctionnons et qu'on fasse adopter ça au chef d'État.
There's therefore the need that we formalize that partnership in order to bring it forward to the thingy. But I've heard that there is an alliance that is being built. So how do we try and stop duplicating things and push forward things that are already nascent? J'ai entendu dire qu'il y a déjà une alliance. Donc comment est-ce que l'on fait pour s'assurer que l'on supporte l'alliance et ne pas créer quelque chose de nouveau encore qui va nous retarder? That's your question.
Parce que l'Alliance prend l'Afrique de l'Ouest.
Non, il a parlé d'une alliance pour l'Afrique centrale.
Voilà, ok. Donc s'il y a déjà une alliance, on va voir comment on peut finaliser ce travail-là. L'idée, l'objectif, c'est de faire de telle sorte qu'il y ait des règles sur ce marché et pour qu'on voit tous dans la même direction.
What is very important is that we all see in the same direction. You done? Yes. Well.
Merci Suzanne pour ta question. Je vais tenter moi également de mettre un peu d'eau dans le même moulin et je vais m'inscrire dans la continuité de ceux qui ont pris la parole avant moi.
I'm going to add to the discussion and be in the continuity of the people that spoke before me.
Et je vais commencer par la dernière interpellation que vous avez faite au professeur Tabouna en disant que la première alliance qui s'est constituée, elle s'est constituée en Afrique de l'Ouest. Elle est bien structurée, elle est forte.
So the first alliance that was built was actually built in West Africa. That's a fair point. And it's strong and well structured.
Les pays de l'Afrique de l'Est sont en train de développer leur alliance avec l'appui de l'alliance de l'Afrique de l'Ouest.
The East African countries are developing theirs now with the support of the West African Alliance.
Et quand nous avons fait les assises pour les marchés carbone en Afrique centrale, nous avions invité et l'Alliance pour l'Afrique de l'Ouest et l'Alliance pour l'Afrique de l'Est. Et l'idée, c'est quel peut être le chemin critique pour qu'on arrive au même résultat, mais avec un temps optimisé.
So the idea when they organized the roundtable in Yaoundé was to bring both alliances in order to pick on the lesson learned so that we shorten the process and the time to develop the Central African Alliance.
Et pour répondre profondément à la question maintenant, en tant que banquier, ce qui se pose comme problème ou bien comme question dans le marché de carbone, c'est que c'est à la fin de la totalité des investissements que l'on va espérer, si on valide le carbone séquestré, on va bénéficier d'un investissement. Ça fait qu'il y a beaucoup d'incertitudes dans le processus qui est long, qui est chronophage, qui est extrêmement technique.
So as a banker now, answering my question, there is a lot of uncertainty when you develop a carbon portfolio because it takes time, it takes money, and it's only when you come to the end of the process, if you don't have an outright off-taker, that you know if you will or will not, and how much you will be able to offload that credit.
Donc du coup, quand on fait une analyse de coût, une analyse d'opportunité, on peut se retrouver dans ce que nous tentons de déconstruire auprès de nos États, parce que ce qui nous revient quand nous allons vers nos pays, c'est les gens qui en parlent, on en trouve, mais les gens qui en bénéficient, on en cherche concernant notre sous-région.
So I tried to translate that. But he said that, so when we are bringing it to our leaders and deciders and decision makers, one of the things is it's very difficult to find the good examples, right? You find a lot of initiatives that are being developed, but you don't find a lot of beneficiaries that can say all the good that the carbon market can bring forward.
No, thank you very much. I like the way he ended up because that's exactly where I was going to start off. But listen, to your question, and again, let me recognize the UN Resident Coordinator, Abdul Rahman, who's here. Again, we count in many of our countries, and in the Congo Basin, we have 17 countries. And UNDP is present in all these countries. The UN is present in all these countries. So again, we still need to be able to leverage and take advantage of the entire UN system to be able to support our countries to take advantage of this market. But just to say, it's an interesting question. 2 or 3 points. I agree with everything my colleagues have said earlier. But the fact remains, carbon market or financing for who? We're talking about people here. Every government has an accountability to its populations. And we're talking about millions of people within this carbon sequestered area of the Congo Basin that should be, in fact, involved in the entire process of the value chain. So to your question, it's not late. I think our governments are getting ready, and this is the time. So even though the process in the beginning was lopsided, the awareness is coming. And I think it's our duty in terms of partners to make sure that we socialize the same with the beneficiaries, the people, because they need to be involved in the entire process of the value chain. And this is where, again, agreeing with my colleague from the Congo Basin Commission, it needs to start with the right policies and strategies. And I'm glad you mentioned the collaboration that we've enjoyed with the Congo Basin Commission, starting with the development of the policies and the strategies. Again, all these policies and strategies need to be socialized with the intended beneficiaries and all key stakeholders, including the bank. Because I think from a private sector perspective, if they are not convinced, they don't want to get involved. So we need to do that. The second thing I want to say is when we talk about integrity, for me, it's equivalent to credibility. So again, when you are talking about carbon integrity, we need to think about the whole line of credibility. And in doing so, there is a trust factor that is involved as well. If I don't trust you, I don't even think that I should get into business with you. And so in terms of developing integrity carbon markets, we need to value the presence of trust within all within all the key stakeholders. And I think, again, this is something that we will be working closely to ensure. But last but not the least, carbon markets is not just a mitigation issue. We need to let our beneficiaries understand that it is also an adaptation lifeline. And I think this is why the communication is also very key in our work with the key partners that we are collaborating with. But we want to put people at the center. And I think this is the value of this conversation as well.
Oui, je voulais ajouter quelque chose de concret.
I want to add something that is concrete.
Oui, nous avons un document qui doit être signé entre la CEAC, qu'est-ce que je dis, entre la Commission climat du bassin du Congo et le PNUD. Et Mathias a déjà signé. C'est pour dire que nous devons déjà maintenant aller dans le concret. Nous avons déjà réfléchi, le PNUD a déjà signé pour faire le travail. Et c'est lui qui a signé. Voyez-vous, donc voilà pourquoi je parlais que quand on sort d'ici, on doit maintenant concrétiser le travail que nous avons commencé, notamment la signature de ce document pour poursuivre le travail.
So the Commission has already moved forward in the process, and a partnership is already being built, and Matthias has already signed his share. We are the one that has still to sign. I just have a spin, and then I won't speak anymore. Matthias, thank you very much for your answer, but I also have something that was triggered by what was said about the off-taker. My feeling is that when you look at West and East Africa, we are talking about savanna carbon and highly degraded forests. The Upper Guinean forest there's no more trees. Savanna forest is what we call a woodland in Central Africa. And I have the feeling that there is more reward for restoration than there is for preservation. And that's a real issue. How can you tell me that I am the carbon sink? I have the densest forest ever on the globality of this world. And I get the roughest deals out there in terms of price. And I'm being told about credibility. The trees are there, even though. And we have the lowest density of population also, compared to savanna countries. So I don't understand why there is that emphasis on conservation, extension of conservation area. What do you want me to do? I can't put the trees in the water. The trees are already there. The peatlands are already there. So I would like to understand what is the real issue for the off-takers to really put a fair price on the highest and sweetest quality. And I will use Carlos Manuel's word, on gourmet carbone that we actually have in Central Africa. Donc, je ne comprends pas, en fait. C'est comme s'il y a un focus qui a été mis sur la restauration vis-à-vis la préservation. Parce que les arbres sont là. On a la meilleure qualité de carbone. On a la plus grande densité de carbone. On a la plus basse densité de population. La forêt est très peu peuplée. Donc je ne comprends pas pourquoi est-ce que c'est si difficile pour les acheteurs de mettre un vrai prix sur notre carbone en comparaison au carbone de savane. C'est comme ça que moi je l'appelle. East African carbon is savanna carbon. Come on. It's bushlands. La forêt haute-guinéenne est un souvenir. Il n'y a plus d'arbres. C'est du cacao et de l'EVA. So I would like to understand why.
Thank you, Susan. I'm just going to ask the panel, please, to be really brief because we are running quite late. So,
Firstly, I share your passion and your frustration with the state of the red markets, effectively. As a conservationist, I'm in this game to protect existing ecosystems. Unfortunately, the market isn't there at the moment, and that's because of the integrity issues and some of the predatory issues we had early on days of red and subsequent articles that have come out from newspapers from my country, from the United Kingdom. I think how we solve the red markets and how we solve conservation carbon projects is the big question that we need to get to. And I don't think as a project developer, I'm in a position to answer that. But there are many, many, many people working to try and unlock finance into red projects. It is how we will be able to protect the beautiful forests of the Congo Basin and Amazonia and in Southeast Asia going forward. What I would say is, from our point of view and how we've kind of got around this at the moment and how we're trying to work to be able to protect existing standing old growth forest as well as restore and use that restoration as a way of financing it, is that we only work in existing protected areas. We only work on land that's been put aside and has been put aside for the targets that the countries have made to 15%. So we only work on public lands. So for example, in Congo, I'm working in a park called Bombolameni, Now that park itself has been highly degraded over the last 20 years. It's lost over 22,000 hectares of its old growth forest. And what we're doing is using that restoration of that existing forest back to a natural ecological baseline to pay for the protection of the 80,000 hectares that's still standing. So it's how you link that restoration to conservation action, and that is in the project design. And to get to that point, you have to have the right investor and you have to have the right off-taker, because the off-takers will pay a higher price if they know that you're going to use it for holistic conservation action. My company's name is Telis Conservation. I'm in this game for conservation, and how you link that restoration to conservation action is how we get over these current barriers for the red markets.
Just to add to that, the other part of the jigsaw, if you like, is around the regulations and the recognition. So companies like the tech companies are buying carbon credits because they have made their commitments and they think it's the right thing to do. But there's nothing saying they have to do that. It's a voluntary commitment. We are seeing regulation coming in, but we're also worryingly seeing developments, particularly at the UN level, where again we're going to undermine conservation efforts into standing forestry, because the rules are being put in place that are going to, or could potentially, exclude nature-based projects because of concerns around permanence. Now, the fact that the Congo has been standing for millions of years, I don't know how much more permanent they want to see it, but the fact that somebody's actually going to be able to tell you that it's permanent for 100 years somehow seems to be better. It all makes no sense. But I think the point is we have a chance now to ensure that that doesn't happen. So it's about getting out and making sure that your voice is heard and that people understand how important preservation and REDD+ type projects are, and they need to be part of the mix. I agree with Jody about the idea of combining with restoration, but we shouldn't somehow say it's worth less, because it's not.
Thank you so much, Jody, Chris, and thank you for a great question. I hope that everyone keeps the conversation outside the panel in the corridors. I wanted to thank the excellent panel, also our excellent translator, thank you so much everyone for attending this great session.
Excellent moderation. I'm sorry I was late.
That's totally fine. It was really complicated today.
I'm so sorry.